So what is FMEA? FMEA stands for Failure Mode Effect Analysis. Now, what is FMEA? This is a tool to identify, to quantify, to prioritize and evaluate risks. I'm sure the workplace we work in, they are full of risks here and there. I'm sure we have taken a lot of actions to mitigate those risks as much as possible, but in spite of that, risks always continue to remain because we always traverse uncharted territory and we really don't know when the risks, in what form they will appear. So typically we are going to talk about two important things. What is the goal of FMEA? And then we will also talk about why is that required. Now, if you talk about the goals, it is about what steps can we take in order to reduce risk or failure. The second thing what we will be doing is how do we ensure that these failures that happen once in a way are detectable. And thirdly, we will also be talking in terms of how we can prevent those failures from happening in the first place, right? Prevention is better than cure. So we will be talking about some of the aspects of prevention, some of the aspects of cure also. Why is it required? To answer that question, it is required to keep track of potential failures and some of the countermeasures that needs to be taken in order to avoid. Now, in order to do that, if you look at the evolution and concept of FMEA, there is something called as a RPN. RPN stands for Risk Priority Number. So what is this number? Of course, when you come to the training workshop, we will be talking in detail about this concept, and we will also be taking up specific examples from the industry in order to reinforce this concept. But at a broad level, this is nothing but it is a product of the severity, the second is probability of occurrence, and then thirdly, to what extent such risks can be detected. So obviously you have something called as a detection rating, etc., all that we will be talking about. These are some of the components of FMEA. So typically we will be talking about what are some of the potential effects of failure. We will also be talking about what kind of control, checks and balances, mechanisms we can have in the shop floors. And thirdly, the recommended actions, because these actions, I'm sure all of you are taking these actions based on various projects like Six Sigma, etc., because life is too short to commit all mistakes ourselves and then learn from those mistakes. Therefore, it is necessary that we need to learn from the mistakes committed by others, by other organizations, and that is how these case studies are extremely important. And in our training workshops, we bring in a lot of case studies from other organizations so that we will not only learn from our mistakes, but we will also be learning from the mistakes of the other organizations. Now, when do we use FMEA? FMEA, at the cost of repeating it so many times, once again, let me explain that for you. FMEA stands for Failure Mode Effect Analysis. Now, there are three important aspects of it. One is, how do we analyze in terms of whether it's a high risk, low risk, how much low. We're not going to talk in terms of binary concepts in terms of risky or not risky. We will be talking about it from the perspective of a spectrum, say on a scale of 0 to 10, in terms of 10 being the highest risk and 0 being the lowest risk. We will be taking up each of these risks, and first we will analyze that, and secondly, it is the improvement stage in terms of what actions we have taken and what kind of an impact it can have, especially as far as the outcome is concerned. And then thirdly, we will also be talking about the control aspects in terms of which failure modes are most critical to control, so that those can be included as part of our control plan. So typically we will be talking about three things, which is analyzing, then secondly, how do we improve that, and thirdly, in terms of how those things can be controlled. Now, if you look at this evolution of this FMEA, initially it was used in the NASA. In fact, I wasn't aware of it because when I used to work in Maruti, I've organized lots and lots of training programs for our shop floor engineers, shop floor managers. But during recently when I was working on this program for Hindustan Petroleum, because Hindustan Petroleum attaches lots and lots of importance on safety, on these kind of shop floor functions. Being in the process industry, they attach too much importance to that. So when I was developing a training program for Hindustan Petroleum, I came to know that the evolution of Fmea was in NASA, sending rockets, and they have their own research on black holes, whatnot, all these space research. It originated from NASA, and of course it was adopted in the automotive industry later, and then it was incorporated in the quality standards 9000 by big three companies. I'm sure you know what those big three companies are. I'm talking about the automotive companies. Any guesses what those three big companies are, especially as far as automobiles are concerned? I'm not talking about those Price Waterhouse, PwC, Deloitte, and I'm not talking about that. In the automobile, when we talk about big three, we are talking about General Motors, Ford, and Toyota, right? It was incorporated by them in their QS 90, sorry, not 90,000. I think it's QS 9,000. And now, not just in the automotive industry, it's being used across all industries. Process industry, for example, it can be used in glass industry, it can be used in machineries, host of other industries, they can be done. Now, as far as potential applications in the oil and gas industry was concerned, we had taken up this FMEA in the context of refineries, in the context of storage tanks, office atmosphere, offshore installations, pipelines, laboratories, etc., etc. Because FMEA is not something which can be implemented only in the production floor. It can be implemented everywhere. It can be implemented in offices. Wherever there is a potential danger or a risk, this can be used. And not just, risk to life and limbs. It can also be used for mitigating risks, economic risks, financial risks. This concept can be used, right? In fact, I didn't know how it can be used in financial to mitigate financial risks, because when we did this group activity with Hindustan Petroleum, there were some chartered accountants also who attended this training program, and those guys came and said they presented for 15 minutes in terms of how this concept can be used to mitigate financial risks. I'm so proud to share with you that during the pre-assessment tests, when I had asked a couple of questions to these chartered accountants, they were not aware of this concept of FMEA. And after the training workshop, those chartered accountants came and spoke to me personally and said, wow, what a beautiful concept it was. And then they explained, they presented how they will be using this concept in their own department, finance department, in order to mitigate risks of a financial kind. So that's the beauty of this training program, because it provides lots and lots of insight into what this concept is and how well it can be used. Now, typically before we look at this training program, we normally look at the decomposition of the word problem, right? When you call it a problem, you talk about a danger, you talk about risk, all that, they all can be used interchangeably. So broad level, a problem or anything is a deviation from the expectations. So what could be the reason? It is a result of so many contributing factors, right? So each of these problems, they present an opportunity for improvement, and that is exactly where we will be using this concept and look for improvement. In fact, the Japanese called it as Kaizen. Kaizen means continuous improvement. All of us are aware that Japan as a country was completely decimated soon after those bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, way back in the year 1945, and we can see in the last 7 or 8 decades how much this country has come up on the economic scene. Such a small country, you can see it's making great strides in technology, science, automobile, productivity. How? All because of this concept of Kaizen, which is continuous improvement, and they have been using all these in some way or other. They may not call it, the terminologies could be different from company to company, but when you look at the philosophy of what these concepts are, you will come to know that the philosophy is the same. The basic theory underlying each of these applications are the same, though they can be called in so many other names. Now, especially in the context of how this can be applied in the industry, it can be identified. It can be used to identify some of the failure modes. It can be used to determine the effect and severity. It can identify the causes. It can identify probability of occurrences, what kind of control and effective systems we need to have. And we will also be learning how to quantify priorities. Life, we want to do everything, but all said and done, each of these resources have to be used very, very judicially. And that's where prioritization becomes extremely important. In the context of prioritization, we will be talking about various theories like ABC analysis, Pareto analysis, which typically talks about how 10% of the variables account for 90% of the problem. So it's important for us to identify those 10 typically it is called as vital few and trivial many, because many of the leaders spend too much time on trivial things without focusing on the main things. And that's exactly where Pareto analysis comes into picture. So we will be taking up Pareto analysis, ABC analysis, this training program, because even here in FMEA, we have something to prioritize. And what is that prioritization? We will be prioritizing the risks. If you have 50 different risks in the company, it's not possible for a few people to focus on all those. Therefore, we will be prioritizing those risks. We will also learn how to develop proper action plans, and then we will also be learning how to document those action plans, what kind of challenges might emerge, what steps we can take to surmount those challenges. All that we will be discussing in this training workshop in full length, right? There are some important terminologies that we need to know. For example, what is a failure mode? What is a failure mode effect? What is severity ranking? What are failure mode causes? Occurrence analysis. And typically when we talk about occurrence analysis, we will also be talking about how we will be rating them, and based on various parameters, how we will be ranking them. And then we will be talking about failure mode control. We will talk about detection rating. We will also be talking about risk priority number. Remember, we talked about risk priority number before the start of this session, where we thought that we discussed that it's a product of severity. What is the severity of that risk, and then what is the probability of occurrence, and then whether it is detectable or not detectable.